it's Jennifer from the blog The Everyday Farmhouse, and today we're going to be making soap with turmeric. And if you've read anything about turmeric, you know it has great health benefits, but it's also really good for your skin. It can help with age spots and blemishes, help clear up acne. It has all sorts of antioxidant properties and just really helps in the overall brightness and appearance of your skin. So I think you're really going to love using turmeric in soap. Plus it makes it this really pretty color. So I'm going to walk you through step by step how to make a batch of this soap. So grab your safety glasses and rubber gloves and we'll get started. Get your digital scale and get whatever you're using, a glass jar, whatever to measure, and tear it out so that it's at 0. And we're measuring in ounces here. We're measuring out 4.35 ounces of sodium hydroxide, which when mixed with water is our lye solution. And so next we're going to measure out 10 ounces of water. Again, using the digital scale. Once that's measured out, you're going to put your sodium hydroxide into the water. I always try to remember snow falling on a lake, and I literally remember that every single time just to make sure I'm not making a mistake or doing something wrong. Then you stir that in and set that aside, as that's going to be pretty hot. It's going to be, anywhere from 160 to 180, just depending. You're going to set that aside because you're going to let that cool down to approximately 100 degrees, somewhere between 90 and 100 degrees. In the meantime, I like to measure out my oils. I measured out 10 ounces of coconut oil and then 12 ounces of lard. You could also use palm oil, 8 ounces of shea butter, and then I'm going to measure out 1.5 ounces of castor oil. Next, I'm going to measure out the kaolin clay that I mix with about a tablespoon of water, and this makes what's called a slurry. And I mix this in when I put in my essential oils, and I have found that it makes the fragrance, it anchors the fragrance and just makes it last so much longer in the bar of soap. And so this is something I do now every single time I make soap. I'm going to measure out the turmeric and set that aside. That's 1.5 tablespoons of that. So here I have everything I need. I set everything aside to cool. You can melt the oils either in a saucepan or the microwave, whatever you're comfortable with. I just set it aside and I go for a quick 20-minute walk, and I come back and usually it's just about perfect. So you want those to be within 10 degrees of each other, and mine were. So you take the oils and then you pour in the lye solution. So I use an immersion blender, and you just start mixing this up, and you're looking for it to start to thicken, not quite to come to trace. Now, something I learned in experimenting with this is that the turmeric does actually speed up trace a little bit, and it doesn't appear to be that way at first, but I noticed that if I let it sit for any amount of time, it does start to thicken, and that happened, and you'll see that in this video. I forgot to add the salt. I often forget to do that, and it's fine to add it at any point. It's best, I think, to mix it in with the lye water, but it's fine to add it at any time. It's just supposed to make a harder bar of soap over time, and I add about 2 teaspoons of salt, and I just use sea salt. Okay, so this is starting to come to kind of a thin trace here. And so I go ahead and get ready to add the kaolin clay and the fragrance oils. And you'll notice as this sits here, it begins to thicken without me even realizing it. And it turns out fine. At first it's a little alarming if your soap does that. You're kind of like, oh no, is everything going to incorporate? But if you just continue to mix, and you'll watch, this is on fast, but you'll see that it does in fact incorporate, once you start mixing it. And I just kind of go, when I'm worried about something coming to trace too quickly, what I do is I switch back and forth between just stirring it and adding, the immersion blender to it so that it doesn't come to trace any faster. So this is still a pretty nice trace. It's not too thick to pour into the mold. It's just about right. So once I pour that in, I just use a skewer to kind of get it I tap it on the counter and then I swirl this back and forth. It makes the top of the soap pretty when you cut it, and also just gets it in there evenly. Make sure it's in all the corners and all the air bubbles are out. So I clean it up with just a little piece of paper towel. And then I have a piece of cardboard that I just save, and I use it for all my soaps, and I just cover the top so that it doesn't get on the towel that I wrap it in. I used to wrap it in a real heavy towel, and I just don't find that that's necessary. So I just wrap it in a decent kitchen towel, and I just set this aside on my kitchen counter for 24 hours. After this is set on the counter for about 24 hours, I go ahead and unmold it and get ready to cut it into slices. And I just use, I think this is just actually a bench scraper, but there's special soap cutters or whatever you have. A sharp knife works as well. And I just cut it into bars. And then you have this beautiful soap that you can use after it cures for 4 to 6 weeks.